Hello and welcome to another video. In fact, welcome to another one in my prototyping series. This is my first to ever attempt to make Injera bread. This is that spongy crepe-like bread that you often eat at Ethiopian restaurants. Now, I've never made this before, okay? I've only looked at a few recipes, and I've also never made a sourdough before. So I do not expect to succeed this time, but through the process, we should be able to, I'll explain my decisions on various points, and we should be able to at least understand what I did wrong and how to do it better. So if you're new to making Injera bread, you may want to watch this and pinpoint especially the retrospective portion at the end, where we talk about what went right, what went wrong, and that sort of thing. Now, Injera bread is typically in these big pieces in Ethiopian restaurants. It is often used as a plate and as eating utensils. In other words, you'll tear off little pieces of it and you use it typically to soak up stews, soak up sauces, eat kitfo, which of course we'll cover in another video, and stuff like that. It's also delicious. It has a very distinctive taste because of its use of teff. But the traditional way in which it's made, of course, is different in Ethiopia than in Western Ethiopian restaurants. But traditionally in Ethiopia, it's just a fermented teff batter. And if you do that, you'll end up with a less, I understand you'll end up with a less fluffy mixture, less fluffy outcome. Now, if you mix in some wheat flour or some barley flour, it can come out a little bit fluffier. And this is what most Western restaurants do outside of Ethiopia. So after reading a bunch of recipes, I've decided for my first attempt to do 50% wheat flour, 50% teff flour. This is then fermented over the course of 5 or 6 days, and it develops a sourdough culture within it that further allows us to make our bread from that. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to use equal portions of each of these, and then 3 portions of water. So 1 portion, 1 portion, 3 portions, and I'm going to do that by weight. So I'm going to start with 125 grams of wheat flour, and I'm just using this flour, but maybe it would be better with a whole wheat flour. We'll see how this comes out in the end. And I'm going to start with 125 grams. That's about 1 cup for those of you in the US. And again, the goal of these videos is partly so that I can learn to make it and do also a full video. You can see how I got there as part of how to improve your own prototyping skills when you're learning how to make a complicated and difficult dish. So here's 125 grams of wheat flour and 125 grams of teff flour. That'll bring me to 250 grams. That'll be there. Yep, perfect. And to this we will add 750 milliliters about that of water. So now I'm adding my water, and I'm going to mix this all up. No, this might be too small in the hole, so I might divide this into 2 bowls, but I want to get it well mixed first. Keep in mind this needs to ferment for 5 or 6 days, and consequently I don't really feel comfortable putting this in a stainless steel bowl for that length of time. So we'll leave this here, or divide into two ceramic bowls. And once this is nicely mixed, I will be back. So I've changed my mind about stainless steel. The reason I did is it occurred to me that normally white wine is actually fermented in stainless steel, so this ought to be fine. Now I'm going to go ahead and allow wild yeast to do this, to work on this batter here. You can, if you don't trust the wild yeast, or you're not comfortable just letting this sit out and take on yeast from the air, you can add commercial yeast at this point. And what the commercial yeast will do is it will outcompete the wild yeast, and it will prevent some rather funny looking stuff developing on the top. So I'm going to go ahead and now cover this with a lid, because I have a lid that works. Plastic wrap loosely covered so that it's not quite airtight would also work. But I'll just put a lid on top of this and I'll set it on the counter, and we'll be back in a week. So I only let it go about 4 days. The yeast has now exhausted itself. You can let it go a bit longer, but I figured I'd go ahead and get this started now. So 4 days later. Now again, the only ingredient we're going to add to what we've already fermented is water. And we're going to add that in two different forms. So we'll go through that together. At this point, the wild yeasts have basically fermented as much as they can, and now we're at a point where it's mostly bacteria and some aerobic yeast on top. So let's go ahead and get started. And then from here, this should hopefully go pretty quickly. So in the last 4 days, we've been seeing sort of a growth of yeast that you can see the remnants of on the top. And it's actually smelling pretty pungent now. Definitely a nice sourdough smell. We're going to go ahead and pour this liquid off on the top. We'll have a clay-like batter, and then from there we'll thicken it and then thin it out again. It's complicated, but not that complicated. Anyway, we'll see how this goes. So here we are with the clay-like batter at the bottom. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take about a quarter of this batter. I'm going to separate it to the side, and I'm going to take twice that much. That'll be about 250 or so milliliters of water, and I will add it to, we're going to go ahead and boil it. Never mind that. So now we have a cup or a quarter liter or so of water boiling, and we have 1/8 of a liter or half a cup of this batter that I'm adding into this. I'm going to boil this and stir it until it thickens. This should happen pretty quickly. And I'm just going to stir it here with this, I think. And once this thickens, we will add it back to the existing batter, stir that in, and then turn it into something, thin it down until it's like a crepe-like batter consistency. Then we'll be ready to go. Oh, look how thick this is. This is definitely, all right. We have our thick, this is almost like a sourdough gruel. All right, here we add this back. All right, so stirring in the thickened batter. I assume this might bring it hot enough to kill the yeast, I don't know. We're not doing leavened bread here, so it doesn't really matter, as far as I can tell. All right. Now we stir this all together. And we have something that's pretty thick here. Now I'm going to add water. To try to make batter this more like a crepe-like batter. And that's looking pretty good. I think I'm going to whisk it to try to get some of these lumps out. And it's only mildly warm, so the yeast is probably still alive. All right, I think we're there. I'm going to pour this into the pitcher and we'll get ready to actually cook this. So I'm heating this pan up on medium. Since I'm not 100% sure I trust the nonstick, I have brushed it lightly with oil. And now I'm going to try to pour a thin layer of batter. It's interesting. I think one issue is it's a little bit lumpy. That might give us some problems. I'm going to pour a thin layer of batter on here and let this cook. I guess I need to cover that little area. And let's just see how this first one comes out. Then I'll do a quick retrospective on it and consider the next one. And basically, one thing about this is we do not flip them. We should let them basically bubble. I'm thinking maybe the pan's not hot enough here, but let's go ahead and see. So for my first attempt, this seems like it's kind of nice as far as the texture goes, but it didn't really bubble up and provide the pores on the top that I think we're used to seeing with Injera. So I'm going to try thinning out the batter a little bit and see if that helps next time. My thinking is that the pores are developing, they're just not reaching the surface. You can see little bubbles here forming. So I'm going to take this off and start the next one, we'll see. Okay, so that last batch came out very gelatinous. Now I think that probably happened because the batter might have acidified too much during the fermentation process. So I'm just trying with a little bit of fresh flour added. Now maybe that'll ruin things, maybe it'll save it, I don't know yet. So we're going to try again. I think also my batter might be too thin, so I might add some more flour to try to thicken it up at this point. So we're going to go ahead and try to cook this one out and we'll see how it comes out. So this one's too thick, probably slightly, and it's still a little bit gluey. So I'm not 100% sure what went wrong there, but my guess is in the sourdough. I will go ahead and basically start the, so the next one I'm going to make is going to be just a little bit less, thinner than this one, and then we'll go from there. Now I want to do a retrospective on the bread here. First of all, it did not puff up and come up with the pores that I would have expected. I think this is actually maybe because the proteins got too acidified. So next time I might try to ferment it for less time. But this is very dependent on local microbial cultures. So have to experiment, try, figure out what works. Flavor-wise, it's tasty, it's not bad. But I think having to mix fermented and unfermented flours obviously is a pretty good indication that I got something wrong. So that, I think the batter was also too thin. I watered it down too much. And so I'd worry about that next time also. It also took me a little while to kind of figure out how thick I needed to make it. So those were the major lessons I took away from this. If you see anything else you think I should do better, or you have any other suggestions, or are there any other dishes you would like to see me try and probably fail at first, please leave those in the comments. If you find this content interesting, I hope I've earned a subscription from you. Please also click the bell so that you can get notified when I make new videos. And if you, basically I look at two things when I decide what kinds of videos to make more of. One of them is likes and the other one is views. You can directly participate in helping make those decisions. At any rate, I want to say thank you very much for watching, bon appetit, and see you next week.